My mom taught me to sell at a spaza shop. She ran a hair salon. I pretty much learned entrepreneurship from my moms.
Umtu ngumtu ngabantu. That on your own, you can't really do it. You need the support of those around you.
You will have a network of people, a network of communities, and a society that will make sure that you count.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Saita Straight Talk. My name is Louise and it's my pleasure to host this program for the South African Informal Traders Alliance. In the series of Straight Talk discussions, we endeavor to speak about all the relevant issues that affect our informal traders. But like we did last week, tonight is one of those topics that affect women, men, and children, in fact, society as a whole, and that is gender-based violence. My guest this evening, all the way from Sweden, although she is a Cape Townian, is Laura Lee Gillian. Laura Lee, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Hi, Louise. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be talking about this because, as we know, it's a real issue in South Africa. And yeah, just to give a short introduction to myself, I guess. My name's Laura Lee. I'm currently a master's student doing gender studies. And I'm in Sweden. I've been here for a year now. Visited home recently. It was really nice. That's a short summary of me.
Thank you, Laura Lee. Listen, it seems tonight I always joke around with the panelists when I say not all Wi-Fi is created equally, but I'm a victim tonight because just before I went live, the fiber connection cut. So I'm sitting on a normal old school data connection. And yeah, we're holding thumbs that everything's going to work out fine and that our session will go without too many interruptions. Laura Lee, you're a gender study student. So obviously this is a subject that's very, very close to your heart. But let's go back to 2019. And I'm thinking particularly of something big that hit the country, South Africa, in 2019. So take us back there.
Right. So I was studying at the University of Cape Town. And as most of us know, this whole movement started with Ionene's death.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Laura Lee, hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you, but your screen's not moving.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay. So then I'll just continue.
Yes, I can. Please continue.
Okay, sure. So basically I was a UCT student and I was also doing gender studies at the time.
Okay, just carry on taking us back to 2019.
Yes, I wanted to say, Louise, your audio is a bit delayed on my side. So I think that's why there's a bit of a miscommunication, if that makes sense. But anyways, I will just continue.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good. So just to explain, I was a UCT student and I was doing gender studies. And as we all know, Ionene's death back in 2019 shook us all, although that was not the first time gender-based violence was an issue, right? It was something that was always happening, but something happened in that moment with her death that South Africa came together and felt that we needed to do something about it. And I remember hearing about her death, and I was very, very so heartbroken because I was really hoping that during the period that she was going to, when she was missing, I was hoping that she would somehow pitch up, somehow that she'll be okay. But it was not the case. And I just felt anger. So I went and started a petition on change.org. And I did not expect it to get that many signatures. Got 800,000 signatures, and being a student, I did not know how to move forward with that petition. It was really something I did not expect, but I think it was an indication of just how tired South Africa is with the gender-based violence issue. Oh.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'm back, it seems.
Yes. Yeah, now you're way more smooth.
So why did you start this petition, and what did the petition say?
So originally I started it because I was just frustrated myself, being a woman in South Africa and obviously experiencing gender-based violence in the most nuanced ways. I was just so sick of it. And like I said, Ionene's death was just the wake-up call, if that makes sense, of just how bad gender-based violence in South Africa really is. And my petition was hoping originally to address the government and, just for a call of acknowledgement of the issue in South Africa, because it seemed like it was absent before that, if that makes sense. I mean, we have the best constitution, one of the best constitutions when it comes to equal rights and all of those things, but we don't see it in the society. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Unene's death in 2019 was really a catalyst to a lot of women getting up and saying no more. And as the court case plays out, and you hear about how calculated it was, you just realize that it could have been any woman, and that it was just that Uyinene believed the perpetrator, because from what I've read, there were other women before her that came for parcels, and they were also told to come back later, and somehow they just did not. So it could have been anybody. So your gender studies in terms of just gender-based violence in South Africa, because in our last session we spoke particularly about the fact that it's almost become institutionalized. We spoke about, with particular reference even to our informal traders, how a lot of our informal traders are subjected to manhandling by the very people that are supposed to protect them, simply because they don't have a trading license, for example. Tell me some of the interesting tidbits that you have found in your study that has particular relevance to South Africa.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I wanted to note that since some of you, it's humanities, like it's very theory. But one of the interesting things I felt that really helped understand the situation in South Africa is the notion of intersectionality. And I don't know if that's a topic you've dealt with before, or if you've heard before, but it's just understanding like how our identity, whether it's our ethnicity, our gender, our actual biological sex, all of those things, race, intersect to influence the way we experience life in the world. And I think what was clear is that gender is a major factor in how we have access to rights, have access to resources in the world, all of those things. So that's something I would say like a tidbit, if that makes sense, from a very theoretical point of view when it comes to gender studies, that helped understand the situation in South Africa. And of course, gender studies also covers historical explanations for what we're dealing with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So we're talking theory now. Let's take it practically. Have you ever experienced gender-based violence?
Yes, unfortunately. I've experienced nuanced versions of it, whether it's walking in the street and it's whistling. And I've experienced more traumatic experiences of it. And then not only that, also a sense of stigmatization, marginalization, misogyny. And remember, it's definitely impacts also, like being a colored woman. My experiences might be different from that of a black woman, if that makes sense. And that's very generalized. So yeah, unfortunately I have, and it's not just, it's also a mental thing you have to deal with, on a daily basis.
Are you up to giving us a little bit more detail about your traumatic experience?
I mean, yeah, sure. I could give details, but I mean, mostly it's sexual harassment. Being from the age of 6, having experienced molestation, and then obviously moving on and experiencing molestation in public spaces as well. Yeah, I mean that I would say is the more personal thing. And then obviously also, just being a woman and voicing your opinion, it's considered you're too loud. You get stigmatized for that, I would say.
So for a woman sitting here and listening to you now, and she's heard you saying molestation in public places, it almost sounds like a contradiction in terms. What does that mean? Because I think as a woman, and the society that we've grown up in, there's a lot of things that are actually harassment, which has become normalized.
Yes.
So highlight a couple of those things for me that you've identified as harassment, where in fact it's actually sexual harassment.
Right. So I think one of the main things is, for example, being catcalled in the street. Now that has been very normalized, and I would say that that's been something that, if you mention how that affected you, it's, well, what were you wearing that you got catcalled? What were you doing? Things like that. And that's been very normalized, and it's almost as if as women we must accept that type of behavior from men, because it's a wanted behavior, right? But that's not the case. And then, I mean, that is, like, I would say, something that almost most women experience, like, which is catcalling or unwanted male attention, right? And then beyond that, I mean, getting groped in public. I've had that happen to me. I've had that happen to me, unfortunately, too many times. And I think that's something that's, if you are to mention it as a woman, it's kind of, it makes people uncomfortable. And once again goes back to victim blaming and saying, well, what were you wearing? And all of those things that we tend to hear a lot as women,
Yeah. And have you come across, or has part of your studies spoken about gender-based violence in the workplace, and what are the forms that it takes?
Yes, definitely. I think we spoke about, I mean, also another interesting one that's very in-depth conversation is care work, right? And how that is very assigned to a specific gender. But in specific, like general workspaces as well, like how women, yes, we might have this influx of increasing the amount of women in the working sector. However, are they actually included? Are they respected? Are they seen as equal employees, if that makes sense? So that's the type of topics we discuss a lot as well in gender studies.
And have you come across any sort of remedy for that? Is it something that only males can fix, or is it something that women can fix also? Because for me, the tragedy in talking about gender-based violence is that this is the second discussion we're having in the series, and I'm really, with the exception of Paul Bester, who was our national head of membership, who was very vocal in our last episode um, about how he detests the whole idea of gender-based violence. It just seems that we don't have enough men, and that society as a whole doesn't encourage men to actively take a stand and say, no, that's wrong, because then they get labeled.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's why I say, we can have a lot of law reforms and things like that, but it's still a societal conditioning, right? That needs to be addressed. The way we think about men, the way we think about women, in relation to men, because the idea of a woman and the idea of a man does not exist separately. It's constructed based off, being linked to each other. And I think, like, so for me personally, my opinion is we need a societal change, as in the sense of the way we think. um and yeah, I mean, I kind of was going to say something else, but I lost my train of thought. But yeah, if you can add on to that, then I might just remember.
You've said something important now, and you
Yeah.
spoke about the way we think ultimately will determine the way we act. And you saying we need societal change.
Yes. Yeah.
How does that happen? How does that happen um, without having to brainwash people so
Mm.
that they forget everything they know? Have you got any ideas on that?
I
What
mean,
what what would you say? Where do we begin?
personally, I think it starts with the home life. Although people would argue mostly it starts with education, but it starts with the way you brought up. And I think, people would argue, well, that is brainwashing, but I don't think any human in this world is not conditioned to think a certain way.
Yeah,
And the real question is, what benefits does it bring to be thinking like that? If you think that women are inferior, if you have a misogyny type of mentality, the repercussions of that thinking, of that brainwashing, is murdering women. You know what I'm saying? It results to that in some extent, so I
yeah.
think everyone is conditioned to think in some way. Brainwashing is kind of a heavy word to say, but it's about what societal change, what societal benefits does that bring for us, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something interesting that you're raising there, and that is the benefits of making sure that there is an equal society.
Right.
Because historically, the men have been the breadwinner, and that has been the power.
Mm-hmm.
And then when women started entering the working market, they ended up in the lower ranks. So they
Yeah.
were still disempowered.
Yeah.
So so now I'm a woman. I don't have any education. I'm at home. Or I might have an education. I mean, I know of a lot of very professional women
Yeah.
that you wouldn't dare touch around a boardroom table, and then they go home and they are victims of
Mm.
gender-based violence. The
Mm.
same happens for our traders. We have lots and lots. I mean, 70% of the informal trading sector in South Africa are women.
Mm.
And a lot of those women are single women that are raising families, and yet they are also exposed to gender-based violence because of their success.
Right.
A lot of
Mm.
women that trade all day go home, and the money gets taken away from them because they're not, they're not used to it. I'm still looking. I mean, you were young, you're a student, and what I know about the generation is that you guys have a very different way of looking at the world than we did 15, 20 years ago. Maybe
Right.
I'm giving away a little bit of my age. So if, if you had to give a man advice, let's say it's a man that comes from a home that where abuse was the order of the day.
Mm.
How do I change that?
Yeah, that is a difficult question because I don't think it is possible to change years of thinking a certain way, right? I mean, it's up to that person to make the decision to listen and to take in that type of, let me say, information. If I'm a woman and I'm talking to a man and he's set on it, this gender-based violence is not an issue, and I'm explaining to him and I'm saying, well, here's the facts and here's my experience and here's a lot of women's experience and whatever, and it is really up to him at the end of the day to listen. But I guess something that I think is important that would help if you know, let's say in the home life, if we're raising our sons and we're raising our daughters, the notion of empathy, putting yourself in another person's shoes. And I think that would change a lot of people's minds, being able to think beyond what they experience in their daily life, being able to see how other people experience things and to try their best not to contribute to their marginalization, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Hmm. No, that makes perfect sense,
Yeah.
especially within the context of informal traders specifically in
Yeah.
our country.
Yeah.
Because the informal trading sector is the most marginalized economically and
Yes.
through legislation.
Yes. Yeah.
So that makes 100% sense. I want to just run to the Facebook comments,
Yeah, no problem.
um, and just share some of what has come up here. Paul says that's correct. Behavior starts at home, but if you are exposed to the wrong treatment, it's up to us as a community to assist those to be told what the correct way is.
Hmm.
Yeah, 100%, Paul,
Mm.
100%. I think, though, that the systemic issues around that is the fact that there's such a lot of shame attached to anybody, whether it's a man or a woman in a relationship that suffers with gender-based violence, is to come out and say, but I am a victim. Because we put such shame on that identity.
Yes, I agree with that. Mm.
There's another chat. It seems that you're not the only international guest here this evening, Laurelie. Dominique says, "Are we allowed to intervene in the affairs of our informal traders living here from North Africa? In their countries, women are still not respected. Would it be our place?" Dominique, oh, I see. No, you are talking of informal traders from another country. I think we have a responsibility because we are governed by certain laws.
Yeah.
And there's an old adage that says, when you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do.
Mm.
So we should be leading by example, but that there's the problem, and that is that a lot of South Africans don't know what that example is.
Mm.
But Laurelie, is there anything else in your studies that you think is pertinent to share with our audience this evening? I know you were looking for something that you missed earlier, and I'm really hoping that you found it, because there was that look on your face that said that was going to be something really meaningful.
Yes. Yeah, I think I was thinking about what you were saying about addressing gender-based violence and whether that should involve men. And I think a lot of the debate, within feminist movements is that that should not be the case, that this should be something that only women deal with. But I argue against that, because I think as women we bear the brunt a lot of gender-based violence. And like I said, it's not only women, it's also men, children, LGBTQ plus community, all of those identities, but we bear the brunt of it. And I think it's almost a double burden to have to deal with gender-based violence and also fight for gender equality and respect and all of those things. So I think it's important for men to be involved in the movement and to take a stand, and you know um if they see something wrong, to say something and not be ashamed that of it affecting their identity in any way. So that was the one thing I wanted to comment. That was what I forgot. um And another thing, I think, just in a general thing, what we feel needs to be changed in I feel needs to be changed in South Africa. And this is a talk I had with another organization. The name is the Embrace Project. Was that we can have all these ideas of what needs to be changed, but the government has currently no political will. We've sent in petitions, they do not respond. And we need to start there. We need a political will in order to make the changes we want to change. So yeah, that's just like my my nail on the point, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's quite interesting, your choice of words, because we had a totally different topic on Tuesday evening past. And the takeout from that, in order to affect change, was also we need the political will.
Yeah.
And that probably is the one thing that the way our system works, that doesn't allow us to hold people accountable for too long. But that's where I'm really convinced that is where Saita is going to make a huge difference, because we are apolitical,
Exactly.
because we're wanting to make sure that there's a change in the economy for the existing traders, so that their businesses can grow and they can employ people, because we all know that once you start eradicating poverty, then it's also a lot easier to start changing people's mindsets, because our communities will obviously be better off. So yes, so from that point of view, I'm really excited for the work that you are doing, and I'm really hoping that one day when you come back to South Africa, or maybe you could start getting involved with Saita in terms of guiding us to make sure that we speak the right speak in order to make sure that gender equality is achieved. Because it's also, as much as Saita does not stand for GBV in any form, we are skewed to making sure that our women traders are safe.
Yeah.
And we would need a lot of work to be done to make sure that that there's a continuum that changes completely. So Harold Dean, thank you for joining us, says, I recently started a separation and divorce support group for male and female. And she says, and to her surprise, there are a number of males that came forth. Well, that's brilliant. That's such good news.
Yeah.
And then Paul again said, indeed, all men are not trash. Men can fix it. And I like that. Well, yes and no, because I do take exception to men saying all men are not trash. Fix it. So, yeah, men for change. Laura Lee, we've just about come to the end of our session. Are there any closing words from your side? Maybe a word of hope to people sitting in a position where they are suffering at the hand of a partner or at work?
Yeah. I would just say that right now, I would say South Africa is, the community on gender-based violence is really strong. And I think that's creating a more safe space for women and for those affected by gender-based violence to come through, and that they should not hesitate to look for those resources. Because as I said, this is like, ever since Ionen's death, this has been quite the community, when we look at the protests and everything. So now is more than ever like the time to come forward and just have a safe space with people who experience the same things, and not to feel, I mean, yes, of course, there's a lot of complication with sharing your story because it's your safety involved, the police response and all of those things. But there's a community that's willing to help, that's full of very expertise people like lawyers and all of those who are willing to do their work for free even. So yeah, I mean, that's at least a good step in the right direction, right? So, or a step in the right direction.
Yes, no, it is. Laura Lee, thank you again. All the best with your studies. How long do you still have to go?
I have a year left, and then I'll come home next year. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
fabulous.
excited.
Well, no, you should be excited. All the best, and we hope to hear and see a lot more of you in
Yes.
the near future. Thanks for
Yes.
joining us.
Thank you for having me, Louise.
And you're welcome. So that's this evening's session of Saita Straight Talk, where again we touched the sensitive subject of gender-based violence. I don't know if you know, but this morning we woke up with the news story that Jacqueline in Guguletu, who had just reconciled with her boyfriend 2 days ago, was set alight and died at his hands. That's the reality of our situation for a lot of women. If you are a woman that is in a situation where you feel that your life is threatened, please reach out. Please reach out. Do not become a statistic. You can look forward to another episode of Saita Straight Talk on Tuesday coming, and please, you have to stay tuned in, because that's going to be one that all informal traders are going to enjoy thoroughly. Till then, from me, Louise, goodbye.